Welcome to Strange Familiars. Allison, how you doing?
Doing well. Nice warm day.
So tonight I'm going to be talking with Jessie. She was on the show before. It's a while back. She had a story of walking pants, kind of disembodied legs that kind of walked across.
And you'd think that would be an anomaly, that would be the only time, but that isn't the only walking pants or just disembodied legs you've had, right?
We've had quite a few, disembodied legs, walking pants kind of stories.
We've had quite a few walking pants stories.
But Jessie's coming back to share some of her grandparents' stories from Appalachia. She's got the story of a creature in the field, or maybe a Bigfoot. Sounds like a Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. One of her relatives' precognitive events. She was able to sort of know what was going to happen.
She had the sight.
Know who was going to call before they called, things like that. And then we talk some folkways and folk magic as well. Before we get to Jessie, though, I'm going to be talking to Nicole and Michele about the Carbondalien Festival. Michelle is the mayor of Carbondale, Pennsylvania.
Now we've got political luminaries.
We talk about the Carbondalien Festival, which I will be at. I'll be speaking at the Carbondalien Festival. That's in Carbondale, November 9th, 2024. For more information, go to carbondalienfestival.com.
And Carbondale is like above...
Carbondale is up Scranton-ish, up that way.
Okay. Somewhere around.
Somewhere up there.
If it has carbon in the title, it's probably related to the coal region,
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, it's a mining town, or was a mining town. I'm not sure if they still do mining or not.
Do they have their own little Bigfoot?
They have a white Bigfoot there.
Oh, that's actually... Sorry, Columbia. That's actually cooler.
Yeah, it's really cool. There's a pretty compelling video of it. Again, I'm not a video guy. I don't weigh in as to the reality or not of these videos.
Yeah.
But if you look up Carbondale, Pennsylvania white Bigfoot, there's a really interesting video of it. Gets right up in its face.
And is it the kind of thing that people have seen over the course of decades, or is this just a one-off kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people have seen that.
Yeah, Pennsylvania is full of
weirdness. Mm-hmm. And another reminder, I will also be speaking at Strange Reality, so I will be doing the online portion of that. That's November 1st through the 3rd, 2024. I think the 1st and 2nd are in-person days there in Nashville, and the 3rd is an online day. For more information on that, go to strangerealitiesconference.com. So this Carbondalien Festival, it's based around this UFO landing that I had never heard of before.
Oh, so they have a white Bigfoot and they have UFOs?
From 1974, UFO landing. In Carbondale, we talk about it in the interview a bit, but I actually went back and I found the article from the Scranton Times, Monday, November 11th, 1974. So this is like the day of / the day after, I think it happened. Mm-hmm. The article is from the Scranton Times, Monday, November 11th, 1974. Search underway for UFO in Carbondale Pond.
Attempts to locate an unidentified object reported to have plunged from the sky Saturday night into a silt pond in Carbondale got underway late this morning as pumping operations were started by firemen from Carbondale, Mayfield, and Archibald. The object reportedly dropped into the pond near Russell Park and emitted a bright glow for 9 hours. Carbondale police Saturday night contacted Dr. Alan Hynek, a noted researcher on UFOs at Northwestern University in Illinois. Today, Dr. Hynek sent associates Matt Grable from Philadelphia and Douglas Danes from Port Crane, New York, into the area to help solve the mystery of the sunken object. Employees of the Tallarico Construction Company transported a huge backhoe to the site from Crystal Lake. The hoe was put into operation this morning, digging into an earthen embankment at one end of the pond in the hope that the water would drain from the pond. Spectators were limited to newspersons, according to Acting Police Chief Francis Dottle. A low-flying helicopter roared over the area about 11:30 a.m. as aerial photographers filmed the scene. Mayor Kaufman has scheduled a news conference for 6 p.m. in Carbondale. The acting chief closed off the area Saturday night, Sunday, and this morning. On Sunday, hundreds of curious spectators were attracted to the scene after hearing reports of the incident, which first came to attention of police about 7 p.m. on Saturday. 3 teenagers, Bill Lloyd and his brother John of 6 Russell Street, and a companion who reside across the street, Robert Gillette, 15, said they were walking about 3 blocks away from the silt pond when they heard a whirring sound in the sky above them. The Lloyds said they looked up and saw a red ball crossing over Salem Mountain from the east and was emitting sparks until it hovered over the silt pond and then plunged about 500 feet into the water. The Gillette boys said the object turned the color of a bright star before it fell. The youngsters called Carbondale police, who had already received a phone call from an unidentified person telling of the object in the skies. Police reportedly did not respond to the first 2 calls and only went to the scene about 9 p.m. after several other calls were received at headquarters about the object. Patrolman John Barbero and Joseph Jacopina went to the pond to investigate, and Patrolman Barbero said, "I saw a glowing object about 20 feet out of the water." Acting Chief Dottle was contacted about the matter, and within a few hours, 12 Carbondale regular and special policemen and policemen from Greenfield and Fells Township and Forest City were on the scene as well. Still considering the matter a hoax and thinking that the light may be from a flashlight beneath the waters, Patrolman Jacopina took out his service pistol and fired at it. When in doubt, just shoot it. Patrolman Jacopina said he failed to hit the object, and the Gillette boy said the object moved when it was shot at. With the hour past midnight, police grew more concerned as the object continued to radiate light that covered a circle about 15 feet in diameter. A call was put in for a boat, and firemen from a Carbondale hose company responded and brought along a net. The scene took on the look of a science fiction thriller as the net was hooked around the object around 2:45 a.m., and as the net was being raised slowly, the light grew brighter, but then the net suddenly grew limp as the object plunged into the murky depths of the silt pond. Police said the light then went out, and they surmised that the silt had covered the glowing object. Then they watched from the shoreline for the remainder of the day and night, and again the next morning, waiting for someone to make a decision on what avenue of approach to take to retrieve the object. Spectators expressed the opinion that the 4-acre pond on the land of John Bauman could be pumped out in several hours. 2 volunteer scuba divers requested permission to go into the water Sunday afternoon to look for the object, but that idea was rejected by the acting chief. The volunteers were identified as Dr. Lawrence Berry, a teacher of psychology and geology, and Assistant Professor George Kelly, a meteorology teacher, both of Temple University in Pennsylvania. I can't imagine 2 more qualified people to go into that. UFO sightings in the Upper Valley are not as uncommon as some may think. A rash of UFO sightings were reported in the Owego Turnpike area of Fell Township last fall, and during the same period there were reports of sightings in Wayne County. 2 Wayne deputy sheriffs told Acting Police Chief Dottle Sunday afternoon they knew what it is. They declined to elaborate, but noted that they had similar things happen recently in Wayne County. Dr. Berry of Temple University said the only thing that could glow underwater for such a length of time would be magnesium, which would not be affected by the water.
And then there was a second article in the same paper.
And this one is entitled Police Guarding Area. What was it that fell into a small silt pond in Carbondale Saturday night? No one seems to know for certain, but there were plenty of opinions among the thousands who congregated at the site on Sunday until police cordoned off the area just before 3 p.m. An eyewitness who was in a boat as police were trying to recover the mysterious glowing object said, "It was glowing. That part of it we could see. We couldn't tell how big it was or what it was. The part that was glowing lit up a pretty big area, but looked like it was only about the size of a quarter. It was luminous under the water, and when we got near it, it lit up an area about 3 feet in diameter." Another said there was a little light down there. A bystander who was at the scene Saturday night said he felt it was a meteorite. "I was up here at 1 o'clock and saw meteorites in the sky. That's what it probably is, but everyone was seeing all kinds of things in the sky up here last night." A teacher from Temple University who visited the site Sunday afternoon theorized that it might be a meteorite partially composed of phosphorus. He said phosphorus burns underwater, and that might have accounted for the glow. Still others consider the whole thing a hoax. Somebody could have put something together and thrown it in the water, maybe a flashlight tied to something, one spectator told the Times. On the humorous end of things, there were plenty at the site who speculated area residents soon would see little green men running around. Probably the biggest problem caused by the object was the crowd that it drew. A resident of the area said, "There's been thousands of people coming here all morning." The crowd caused massive headaches for police. Cars literally blocked roads leading to the Russell Park area. Small children played on the steep banks of the hazardous pond and climbed on roofs of abandoned buildings nearby. And finally, at 2:45 Sunday, Acting Police Chief Francis Dottle ordered the area cleared of spectators and said the entire site would be cordoned off and guarded by police and Civil Air Patrol. Did they ever figure it out? Was there a conclusive?
Well, follow-up articles in the newspapers claim various things. It was a flashlight, but I don't know.
I've never had a flashlight that worked underwater
Especially from 1974.
For 9 hours.
Remember how cruddy flashlights were in 1974?
I remember the one you were like given on Halloween night, like the silver one with the red thing at the top that had like basically the whisper of a thought of a light inside of it. It was like a light bulb that was like maybe the size of a thumbnail inside of it and provided enough light for maybe someone not to kill you while you're walking on a dark street. But
if they got near to you,
if you shook it the wrong way, it would go off. So how would it last underwater for 9 hours?
Yeah, that seems unlikely. Somebody said a railroad lantern. What?
Underwater.
Yeah,
an underwater railroad lantern.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right to me either. You know, the feeling of this is like one of those stories where something weird happens. The government rolls in. They cordon off the area.
They make it sound silly.
And then they come out
a lot of like,
yep, it was just a flashlight, and
it was some kids.
Do I think they pulled an alien vehicle out of that pond? No, not at all.
Could have been something from the sky that we were unaware of previously.
Yeah. I mean, because is it something anomalous that they never found? That's probably most likely it. Whatever it was, they never found, but they want to have answers to give to people so people don't panic and freak out. And
then they always have to add like, oh, pretty soon we'll be seeing little green men.
Yeah. So that's the original newspaper story. Now let's talk to Nicole and Michelle from the Carbondalien Festival. And again, Michelle is the mayor of Carbondale. Very impressed by that.
Is that the first mayor for the show?
To my knowledge, I think so.
Unless other people were mayors and we were unaware.
Exactly, that's what I said.
Unaware mayors.
All right, let's go ahead and talk to Nicole and Michelle. I'd like to welcome Nicole and Michelle to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Great. Thanks for having me.
Well, happy to have you here, and we're here to talk about the Carbondalien Festival. But first, maybe you should introduce yourself. Michelle, I think you're a person of note around Carbondale.
Well, not as popular as Nicole the past couple weeks. I'm Michelle Bannon. I'm the mayor for the city of Carbondale. I'm proud to be it.
All right.
Have you?
It's great to have you on the show.
Love being here with you.
And Nicole, you're helping organize the Carbondalien Festival.
I am.
Yeah. So yeah. I have to say, I've been into this weird stuff quite a while now and consider myself pretty deeply read on Pennsylvania weirdness. And I had no clue about this UFO landing in Carbondale.
Have you been reading up on it, or are you still?
I'm going to look it up. And I was going to find the original articles and maybe present it with this interview to my listeners. But I know the very, very basics of it. But maybe you can tell the listeners a little bit about it, one of you.
Michelle's the resident UFO historian.
So funny story, Tim. You're not the only one that doesn't know about the weirdness. Today was career day over at Carbondale area, and there weren't a lot of kids that knew about it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty much people around our age, Nicole and I's age. And it happened when I was 5 years old. I live right back the street from where it occurred.
Really?
And yep. And I remember the day vividly. So what happened were there are 5 boys, but only 3 documented. We only have 3 names. And they said they saw something coming through the sky from Salem Mountain, and that went over the football field, and it went into the pond. Carbondale is a big coal mining town. They had a colliery back there, and there's a little pond where they would wash the coal in, and the lit up object went into it. So they called the police, and the police came up, and they got a little nervous. So they called the National Guard, and then they started calling other people in, and they called a doctor from down, 2 of them actually from down in Temple around the Philadelphia area. Mm-hmm. And they came up here, and they checked out the site, and they immediately ruled out that they didn't think that it was a meteor or a satellite, simply because there weren't any gouges in the ground. There weren't any trees down from it flying in. There wasn't any splash patterns. So they were curious about that. And then there is a lot of lore around it. There was one person, I believe it was a girl, she said that it saw it hover over the pond for 5 to 7 seconds, and then it went into the pond. So at that point, The police were here. They had the people here. They were trying to figure it out. It was getting late, and the crowd died down. They came back in the morning. And at that time, which I find amazing, Russell Park isn't a huge area. It's a big park, but it's not gigantic. It started out with about 1,000 people, then it escalated to about 3,000. And by the afternoon, they had over 10,000 people back there.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy? So the light shone in the water for 8 hours after it landed, and then the light went out. So they had some divers here. They had some other emergency units here, and they still couldn't figure out what it was. So they were going to drain the pond, and they realized that it was taking too long to do that. So then they were going to dig it out and make a pathway for the water to go into, but they were afraid it would cause flooding. So then 2 police officers and one of the doctors went into the boat, and they had a big stick for all intents and purposes, a fishnet at the end of it. So they were poking around at it. And then one of the officers felt the object from the water. It jilted the boat a little bit. And he nervously reacted, and he shot 6 rounds in at it.
Oh, wow.
But nothing, I know, isn't that crazy? Nothing occurred from it. So this is where it gets very peculiar, is that nobody could identify it. They were going to put a diver in the water, but he couldn't see anything because it was too murky and mucky. And they did test the water to make sure it was okay for him to go in, and it was. But then during the night that night, they took the whatever it was in the water out of the water under the cloud of darkness and put it on a lead-lined truck and took it out of town the back way, and nobody saw what went out with it.
Oh.
So that's where all the mystery comes around.
Yeah.
Now, one of the boys claims that he threw a lantern into the water, but he just died a couple of years ago, and he admitted on his deathbed that was just a story he made up, that wasn't true.
Interesting. Very interesting. So when you say they took it away, does anyone know who they are? Presumably the government, but
It's the government, but we don't know what faction of the government.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
And what year did this occur?
1974.
74. Wow, that's
Yes.
a big year for weirdness in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
A lot of strange things happened in 74. Yeah.
What else happened?
Well, if you read Stan Gordon's books from out in western Pennsylvania, a lot of stuff was going on out there. But also here in York County, we were having quite a flap of Bigfoot and UFO stuff as well around that time.
Really?
Yeah.
So we're Area 51. That's our call numbers, our emergency call numbers.
Really?
Isn't that ironically weird? Yeah.
Huh. So I guess there was a lot of witnesses, must have been at least to the glow in the water.
Yeah.
And do a lot of people around there still remember that?
Yeah, there's a lot of people, but they quarantined it off where people couldn't see it. A lot of people saw from far away and the back way in, but they didn't let a lot of people near it because they didn't want the mass hysteria going on.
Right. Wow, what an amazing story.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. This is the first year for the Carbondalien Festival, yes?
It is.
These little festivals that are dedicated to the unique and strange things with these little towns, I absolutely love them. And I was so excited to hear that you guys were doing this. It's a great idea, and I think you'll have success with it, like I said, as we do with Albatwitch Day. I think it's going to do well for you. You want to tell me a bit about the festival itself?
Yeah. Gosh, it's just really grown so much since, we kind of were just talking about what we might do to celebrate 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like Michelle said, we remember it. Although we were young, we were only 5. It's just interesting that a lot of people don't know about it. Or I also feel like, and I don't know if you see this, Tim, that people are embarrassed by these types of events because it was made into this kind of like a mockery, like a lantern that was thrown at, everybody got excited about nothing really, nothing really happened. And then people didn't talk about it because I think they were just made to feel embarrassed of it. So like, our parents' generation, it's rare really to hear them discuss it. And I think that's why younger generations really don't know about it. Or, just people in the area, we hear that all the time where they're like, how could I have lived here my whole life and have never heard this amazing story?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just exciting for us to be able to celebrate Carbondale in this way and kind of celebrate this fun, weirdness, or as Michelle calls it, our quirkiness in Carbondale in this way. So yeah, the festival, it's from 11 to 5. We have amazing vendors that will be there, food trucks, music in the park. We have some great speakers that'll be there, including Tim Renner talking about the 1920 Bigfoot flap in Pennsylvania at our hotel, our beautiful hotel in town. And then we have Heather Taddy from Paranormal State and Alien Highway. She'll be there for our after party, our VIP party. And then we have Steamtown in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and they're sending up a steam engine with passengers to come up and celebrate with us in Carbondale. That'll be coming into our station. And then back the park, as we call it here at Russell Park, we have a local playwright who wrote this amazing play as a reenactment. So people buy tickets, they'll be treated like the press. We have the National Guard is going to be there, kind of, asking the press where they're going, giving them permission to kind of pass through onto the site. And yeah, so they'll be able to hear the stories from different points of view, from the National Guard, from the diver, from local people that were witnesses to it, from one of the, the boys that were there. And it's amazing. I was lucky enough to sit in on the first table read with the actors that'll be there that day. And I had goosebumps. It was funny and just really very, very well done. I think people are going to be just thrilled to.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah.
And the pond is still there, so be able to do this at the site.
That's what I was going to ask. Wow. So it's going to be right there. Wow. That's great.
So we'll have a shuttle from town. It's a little bit of a walk, uphill kind of ways. It's top of the town. And then also at the park, we have an alien hot air balloon that's coming down from Binghamton that will be doing tethered rides, which, just the idea of seeing an alien hot air balloon from the pond, like in my mind, my artist mind, like kind of thinking about the photo ops are just going to be amazing. And also from the hot air balloon, like it's almost, the same view as the UFO would have had as they went to the town and decided to submerge in our pond there. So yeah, in the town itself, the Y is having an alien swim, a free swim for people. The library is doing all kinds of amazing things all day, crafts for kids, story time. They're doing extraterrestrial like movies all day. And then our local, well, it's not our local, it's Pennsylvania, the penguins, the little pens are in Wilkes-Barre, and they decided to adopt our town as their team kind of mascot for next year. They do local. Last year they were, Piston Tomatoes, Old Forge Pizza. The next year they're going to be the Carbondale UFOs. So they're going to make this big announcement at City Hall. Yeah, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic.
Yes. All sorts of, cool photo ops downtown. Of course, we're going to have some costume characters for people to do photos with. We have an 8-foot Bigfoot coming who a local artist has made with hair from Harry and the Hendersons.
Wow.
Which I can't wait to see him in person. He looks amazing. So, and then we have our 6-foot aliens we have 33 6-foot aliens that are mostly around Carbondale, but throughout Lackawanna County. So that's fun. We've been doing this kind of scavenger hunt for our alien invasion. So.
Oh, that's great. Oh, this sounds like so much fun. So much fun. If people are coming in from out of town, there are places to stay, and if they want to spend the day and grab something to eat, I'm sure there's plenty to eat around town and so forth.
Yeah, we have lots of great restaurants downtown. We will have food trucks, but then, we have restaurants right around town that people can walk to. Certainly, we have the Hotel Anthracite right downtown. It's part of Settlers Hospitality, and they have been an amazing partner in all of this. And I know that they're offering like special room rates for the festival.
Oh,
so they
great.
like part of it for sure.
So if people want to find out more, they can go to carbondalienfestival.com.
Yep. Website.
Mm-hmm. It's a free event, right?
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, there are ticketed events, but the festival itself and the speakers all day are free.
Okay.
And then if you want to do other things like the Russell Park experience, it's ticketed. The hot air balloon rise, there's a charge for that.
Right.
And then the party with Heather is a ticketed event.
And I'm sure it's family friendly as well, everything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Sounds like a great time. I'm super excited to be a part of this. It's the Carbondalien Festival. It is November 9th, 2024. What time does it start again?
11 a.m.
So it's 11 a.m. until
5. Although the hot air balloon will be going until dusk because they do like a lighted, like static lighted display, which is gorgeous.
Oh, cool.
And then Heather starts she's from 6 to 8:30.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to be there. I can't wait to see Carbondale, and I'm very excited about being a part of this. I'd like to thank you for inviting me. I'll be there for the listeners. Stop by. It sounds like it's going to be a great day. One more question before you go. There's a very famous Bigfoot sighting around Carbondale. Do you know it?
We sure do.
The white Bigfoot, yeah?
Gorgeous. What do you think? Are you going to do a little investigating while you're in town?
Yeah, I would love to. I would absolutely love to. That video is very, very interesting. I'm not one for video with this stuff. I'm usually kind of, most of it I'm shaky on. So I'll never weigh in yes, it's real. Yes, no, I'm not a video expert. I just go with my gut kind of thing. But that video is very, very interesting. And someone did a breakdown of it in very slow motion. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a video expert, but that one's very interesting to me.
Was that up the high school? Where was that?
It was over on the west side of town, towards Albrook and Dundav, in the woods back there. So in the clearing up there. And funny you say that, Tim, is one of our police officers, he has a little affinity for Bigfoot as well. And so does his grandson. And he did a whole bunch of research on that. And one of the groups he's in, they actually did have this mechanism that looks at their faces, and they can tell when they're masks and then when they're moving around. They said you can actually see his jaw muscles moving as he was turning, and things, and his facial movements were all natural muscular movements that they weren't a mask.
Yeah, I think the video I saw, you could see it squinting, like they just went frame by frame, and you could see the eyes kind of move, and it's very interesting. I'm
maybe
not a video expert, but that one's super interesting. I really like that one.
Maybe you can hook Tin and the police officer.
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
I'd love to talk with him.
Coming in Friday night, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. It's Carbondalien Festival, November 9th. Come on out and see me and see Carbondale and experience everything great they have there. Thank you, Nicole and Michelle.
Thanks for having us.
Oh,
Thanks. This was fun.
if you like Strange Familiars,
I do.
that's good because you're kind of stuck with it.
Yeah.
But if those listeners out there like Strange
People who have a choice.
and they would like to help us continue to make Strange Familiars and get extra content, they can become patrons at Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. All of our patrons get commercial-free versions of the weekly shows, plus extra episodes every month. We always guarantee one episode every month, exclusive to our patrons. Sometimes we do more. This month, I think there's going to be more than one. I'm working on multiple patron episodes right now. Just have to put them together and get them out there. Again, if you want to check out the options, there's different tiers of support. Go ahead and go to patreon.com/strangefamiliars. There's also an option via Apple Podcasts. The program there is called Patron of the Strange. And you can join on Apple Podcasts and also get the commercial-free shows weekly and the bonus episodes monthly. Thanks to our patrons, no matter where they're signed up. It's a great help. It really helps us continue to bring you Strange Familiars. All right, next up is Jessie, going to share some of her grandparents' stories from Appalachia. I'd like to welcome Jessie back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm well. It's good to see you and talk to you again.
Yes. Now, you were on before, and you have to remind everybody just a little bit. I definitely forgot your episode number because we're getting close to 500 now.
I can't remember what, I think it was maybe in the 200s or something. I can't remember what episode, but I was a walking pants.
Yes, I remember
the walking pants story. And it was, growing up, like my only, like really, well, now I read some about it. And so, like, I know it's like classified as like high strangeness. And it, the only real story I had like that. So I told the walking pants story about seeing a pair of pants walking across my mom and papa's yard when I was like 7 or 8. And so I had said at the end of the episode, I had like a couple more stories from my grandparents and I would share them. And so now it's been a couple of years. So we got back in touch again. We're, we know each other from like music and stuff. So we've kept in touch. So I got with my grandma and, made sure I had all the details right. And I'm ready to share those stories.
Okay. And these stories come from your grandparents. And what area were they from?
So both of these stories would have been in southwestern Virginia. Excuse me. One is probably a short story, but it really is very striking for me, and it's from my grandpa, and I can't tell you exactly where in southwestern Virginia because he grew up as a sharecropper.
Okay.
And so he worked on a couple of different farms in southwestern Virginia, so I don't know the exact area. And then the other story has like a couple of different places. It's a connected story in southwestern Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And before we go on, there's been some debate lately, both on the Strange Familiars Discord and a little bit on the show. Appalachia or Appalachia?
Well, so I'm from Central Appalachia, and I say Appalachia. Mm-hmm. And I used to be really hardcore about that. And I think everybody from Southern Central Appalachia is pretty hardcore about it. And they have a say, like we have a saying, like, if you get it wrong, I'll throw an Appalachia. But then when I went to college and I live in the DC metro area now, I met more Appalachians from like northern areas, like especially Pennsylvania and New York, and they say Appalachia. So I just come to the consensus. I mean, all of us, whether you call it Appalachia or Appalachia, if you're from there, you're from there.
There you go.
So
when I was learning clawhammer banjo, I took lessons from a guy in West Virginia, and he told us. So I was saying Appalachia for years because he said if I hear anybody say Appalachia, you're out of my class. So I was like, this must be the way it's said, but it's just different place, I guess, different regions, and I've heard other people from West Virginia say no, it's Appalachia. There was a band called Appalachian Terror Unit, and they were very.
Oh my God, I love them. Actually, my really dear friend Smalls, he was a little crust kid many, many years ago. He had like an Appalachian Terror Unit tattoo, and he was the most lovely little kid, and he actually died in a train hopping incident.
Oh my goodness.
And this was probably 15 years ago, but he was the sweetest little boy in the whole world. So I know Appalachian Terror Unit. And I don't know if you remember this, but years and years and years ago in Richmond, there was a place called Alley Cats in Shockoe Bottom, and they used to have something called Collapse Fest, which was like a crust and punk kind of festival. And I caught Appalachian Terror Unit there one time. It was awesome. Really great. Yeah.
They had still screened some t-shirts for me. Specifically, I remember For some reason, I didn't like their T-shirt selection, like the blanks they were screening on. So I asked the guy, I said, "Can I just send you some blanks and you screen them up? Still pay for them." I think he charged me $5 or something, but he put them on my own blanks. I think I still have those shirts.
Yeah, they were really nice people from what I remember. But I mean, that was like, Lord, 16, 17 years ago for me.
Yeah,
but
I'm thinking it was, it had to be because it was before I moved. So yeah.
As far as the Appalachia thing, I mean, you'll still encounter a lot of people in like Georgia, Western North Carolina, like in the Smoky Mountains, in the Blue Ridge, Shenandoah, Southern West Virginia. Like they'll get pretty mad if you call it Appalachia. But having met people from Appalachia and they have very similar culture, they're Appalachian people, but they call it Appalachia. I perfectly accept that.
All right. Well, we'll treat it like place names. If the people from that place calls it Appalachia, we'll call it Appalachia. Yeah.
It's like I'm from near a place in southwestern Virginia called Galax.
Oh yeah.
And the largest fiddlers convention in the world happens there, bluegrass convention. So that's a little bit different because like everybody from there calls it Galax. Now you'll hear it all the time. People call it Galax. Now those people are wrong, and 100% of the time they're wrong.
Right.
So that's slightly different.
Yeah, I'm familiar with. There's a whole clawhammer banjo style they just call the Galax style. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's not the style I play, but it's very interesting. It's a good style. I like it, but it's not the way I play.
Actually, my grandpa that I'm about to tell his story, Robert Basel, his mom, Trudy, actually played clawhammer.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, let's get to these stories.
Sure. You want me to just go?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so the first story, and this one is already really, like, it's always stuck with me, and it was my grandpa, Robert Basel, and he was young. It was probably maybe the late 40s or early 50s, maybe. So he would have been like 10, 13, something like that. He grew up sharecropping, and so I can't tell you the exact place this happened, but it was somewhere in Southwest Virginia because it was one of them farms that he lived on that he worked. And I don't know the entire details about the day or why he was going out, what he was doing, but he was walking with his dog across this fallow field. And this story ain't never changed all the years that he told it. And it's the only story that I've ever heard him tell like this. He never told any other ghost story or weird story. He was a serious, he could joke around, but in general, he was a serious man. But he'd always tell his story the same, that it was him and his dog walking out across this fallow field, and there was a tree line on the other side of the field. I don't know what they was going out there for. And he saw what looked like a big, shiny rock in the middle of the field. And he started getting up close to it, and he noticed that it had fur on it. And the dog started growling. And I guess the dog growling alerted this thing or whatever it was, and it stood up on hind legs.
Oh, jeez.
And I don't ever remember him ever saying nothing about seeing the face, like he saw the back part of it. But it stood up on its back legs, and it took off towards the tree line, and it jumped from the ground up into the tree canopy and took off. And the thing that's really weird about it, that makes it extra weird, because if you hear it like that, you think, okay, well, maybe it was like a panther. But, I mean, it don't make no sense that it was on its back legs, but maybe it was a panther. But when it stood up on its back legs, the front leg or whatever came down, and it looked like a human hand. He could see that it looked like it was like it was bipedal, and he said it looked like a furry, black, glossy fur person. And it took off towards the tree line and jumped from the ground up into the tree line and took off. And it never changed. He told this story my whole life until he died, whenever you would ask him about it. And it never changed. And it never made no sense to me what this was that he saw. Because like I said, you know, when you think about, especially down there, okay, something black glossy fur takes off, jump up in the tree limbs and takes off, or in the canopy. It could be a panther, you know. But then the fact that it stood up on its back legs and it had hands like a human. And he said that it was big like his daddy big. So his daddy, Grandpa Rush, was a big man, like over 6 foot tall. And I remember stories from when he was young talking about, you remember old ice boxes? Like the big ice boxes?
Oh, yeah.
Like Grandpa Rush was so big, he could put a strap around his body and around an ice box and move an ice box by himself. He was a big man. And so Poppy would talk about whatever this was being big like his daddy was. I mean, that's the end of the story, but, you know, I've spent a lot of my life ruminating over it, and it don't make no sense to me. Because, I mean, and I have, every time I want to say, well, maybe it was a panther, but then why is it walking on its back legs and it's got hands?
Right. Well, the other thing about, and I know there are Black Panther reports throughout the South, and including in the neighborhood I grew up in. I never saw it. The kids, we would play hide and seek at night, and the kids would run terrified, and they'd say, you know, the Black Panther was this known thing. In fact, I think we even found tracks one time around our barn. But I never, you know, again, I never saw it, but, you know, these kids were scared by something. They were very scared by something. But the thing is, there's no such thing as a melanistic mountain lion. So whenever people are seeing Black Panther, they're seeing something truly weird, even if it is a panther. But I'm not saying that's what it was at all. I mean, you know, obviously, but my mind's going to something else. Did he ever put a name to it? Did he ever call it anything?
No, he would never call it nothing. He always steadfastly said he didn't know what in the hell he saw. And he said it scared the bejesus out of him.
I guess so.
And I don't have any idea how he restrained the dog, because, you know, I mean, it was a farm dog, and I mean, he was sharecropping. I mean, they wouldn't have had a leash on it. I don't know if it had a collar and he grabbed the collar or he scruffed it or what, because I'm going to tell you, one thing I would have remembered is if that dog had took off after it in the woods after something like that, that dog wouldn't have come back. And that was never a part of it. Now, as far as panther sightings, I mean, that is something that is like real regular, especially in like Western North Carolina. You'll hear them called painters. Painters. But I don't think that's what it was, because I ain't never, in every time I ever heard of a painter sighting, I ain't never heard of nothing about it getting up on its back hind legs or having fingers. And he was very detailed. He said he saw digits, like in the, like 5 fingers and digits in a palm, like it was a flesh colored palm. He saw it. And so I don't think it was a panther. But then, you know, I ain't no expert on, now listen, I don't know if Bigfoot exists, but, you know, just like I talk about with my walking pants, like I'm not going to say never. I think there's been so many people that have seen things like that there probably is some truth to it. But I'm going to, you know, while I may not be an expert on them sightings, one thing I can tell you is, at least in my experience, I don't ever remember hearing tale of no one of them jumping from the ground up into a tree canopy and taking off.
I mean, you know, there's so many reports, and I've just, for writing Where the Footprints End, all the weird stuff I dug into. There are some out there where people say they make these sort of superhuman leaps. a number of them say they start out and they seem smaller. They look like a ball on the ground or something. And suddenly they pop up and they're real big.
Yeah.
So it's not things I haven't heard, before as far as Bigfoot stories go, but I don't want to put a name on it because he didn't. You know what I mean? I don't want to say that's what it was because he didn't put a name on it either.
We've talked about it over the years, and I even talked about it with him, and, we always ruminated on it and just didn't have any idea what it could be.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's funny you say that because that is how he described it. It was like a black, shiny, he always said it was like a black, shiny rock or a black, shiny hump in the ground. And he didn't know what it was. And then got up, and it got up real big.
Wow.
And took off.
Mm-hmm.
In all the years, like talking to him, trying to just speculate with him, I remember he was never big on speculating on it because he was a pretty matter-of-fact person. And he's like, well, I don't know. But I do remember at one point him being like, well, maybe it could have been like this is the only time I remember him speculating is him saying maybe there was like a traveling zoo and it could have been like an escaped monkey. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but what kind of damn traveling zoo is going through rural 1940s central Appalachia,
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, like, these animals were super expensive. I have tracked down stories that occasionally they would escape and these zoos would go after them. They didn't want to lose those animals. They paid a lot of money for them. So they would go after them. So yeah, unlikely that. But that's, if you're trying to explain it, maybe you go there. I'm reminded again of one of my favorite local stories. It's from Delta right here in York County. And these people were coming home. This is in the 1800s. They're describing, and they said it looked like it was the size of a bucket. And suddenly it stood up and it's like 10 feet tall. So here was a little thing and it just, stood up. So they described this big hairy thing. They didn't use the word Bigfoot back then. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. It's like, yeah, it looked little on the ground and then it just stands up to this big thing. So interesting. Very, very interesting.
So I am going to say this one thing, and I really want to preface this with that. I'm not saying this to intend to bias or plant a seed or anything like that. But the only other thing that, because I always felt like it had like these cat-like qualities and then these things that are like associated with like a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only other thing I ever thought about is in southwestern Virginia and in western North Carolina in the Smokies. It's not really talked about anymore, but there is a cryptid that is local to there that is known as a wampus cat.
Okay.
Now, if you look up what a wampus cat looks like, a wampus cat a lot of times is described as having like 6 legs. It can have like all different kind of definitions. I've heard other tales of people that thought that they saw or were interacting with the wampus cat and like what they were describing seems a whole lot like where they're sitting around like they're camping, sitting around a bonfire and they're getting like tree knocks and rocks thrown into their campsite, but then they hear like what sounds like mountain lion screams around it. So it can vary. And again, I don't want to bias the story at all, but that sometimes has like been what has come to my mind. Sure. Is something that has like these almost like feline properties, like this jumping into trees, which we know mountain lions do, but then also like these Bigfoot like qualities. But again, it's all speculation. It's all speculation.
I want to say it's Tennessee area. I ran into some stories where people were referring to Bigfoot, but they were calling catamounts also, which is another name for a mountain lion. But they were essentially saying, no, that's what we call these hairy things. They call them catamounts. So, yeah.
Well, so a catamount officially is actually more like a bobcat, but okay. I actually did go to Western Carolina University for part of a graduate degree, and our mascot was the Catamount.
Okay, well, there you go.
It's in Western Carolina, right on the fall boundary for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Nation.
Okay.
But
that's probably, close enough to that region where.
Yeah. But the Wampus cat is kind of like officially what it's called. The other thing I will say about that story that I always really liked, if you take away like kind of my commentary on it, is that it's so simple.
Mm-hmm.
His story never changed.
Yeah.
He's like, I walked out with my dog. Dog started growling. There was this like shiny black thing sitting in the middle of this fallow field. Got closer and it had fur on it. Looked like fur. It stood up. It was as big as Daddy. And it took off towards the tree line. It had hands like a person. And it jumped off into the trees and took off.
Wow.
You can't get no simpler than that.
Right.
And like that, all the years I knew him, that story never changed.
And you said he didn't have like a whole bunch of other ghost stories or anything like that?
I haven't nary other one.
Yeah. To me, that makes it more pointed, like maybe more serious, because he has one story and that's it.
He didn't. If he had another story, I never heard it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would pester him sometimes. It was rare, but I would be like, did you, you got any weird story? You got a weird story? And that would be the only story he would ever tell.
Yeah. That's an important point, I think. That's interesting. Very interesting.
It's weird. It's just a weird story. The other story, and this one's got like much more elements because it goes over a lot of years. And I talked to my grandma. She's at the center of this.
Is this his wife? Same side of the family?
Yeah,
okay.
my grandma Judy.
Mm-hmm.
So it started. I remember these like two very distinct stories with her grandma and her grandma passing and her dad passing. And we got to talking, and so I'm going to try to make a little bit of a narrative out of it. I'm not really a good storyteller, but I hope that I can like convey it. So when I was talking to her, the story I really remember that always stuck out was when Granny Tori, which would have been her grandma, which would have been my great-great-grandma, died. And so just to kind of set the scene, so my great-grandparents, which I actually grew up spending a lot of time with my great-grandma Venice, but I didn't know my great-grandpa Harless. So it was Venice and Harless, and they lived in a house, and across the street up on the hill a little bit was Harless's mom, Tori. So Granny Tori. So at the time this happened, my grandma was actually pregnant with my mom. So this would have been in 1964. And my grandma, Judy, and my grandpa, Robert Basil. Robert Basil's the one that saw the thing in the field. Judy and Robert Basil, my grandparents, were living in Roanoke. And they had come back to visit Judy's mom and dad, Venice and Harless. And this is a regular occurrence. Like they came and visited pretty regularly. And this would have been in like February of 1964. My grandma said she still remembers it very well. She was sitting at the kitchen table with Ma and Pa Harless, and she heard Granny Tori hollering from across the road. And she thought that maybe Granny Tori just wanted them to like maybe take some money to pay her light bill or take her to town or something. So she stuck her head out the door and said, we'll be over there in a few minutes. So they finished their breakfast and they went out and walked across the road to Granny Tori's house. And Granny Tori was sitting on this rock wall that was in front of the house. And I know exactly where this was at because this Granny Tori's house was still standing until I was like 25 or 26. It's torn down now, but I can see it in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
So they walked across the road, and Granny Tori, and it was freezing outside, middle of February. Granny Tori didn't have no coat on or nothing. And she was sitting on this little low rock wall in front of the house. And she was soaking wet because she was sitting on ice. And what had happened is she had gone out and she had slipped and broke her hip.
Ooh.
And somehow when she hollered across the street at them, and they said, we'll be over in a little bit. I mean, it was kind of her nature. She was just like, well, all right, I'll just sit here. She didn't keep hollering, you know.
Right.
And so by the time they got over there and she was sitting on that wall, she was soaking wet. And my grandma said she doesn't remember who exactly they called to take her to the hospital because they didn't have an ambulance service at the time, but they called somebody to take her to the hospital. And she was in the hospital for a little while, had broken hip, and I guess she got pneumonia and got real bad off in the hospital. And my grandma said they wouldn't never let her go see Granny Tori while she was in the hospital because it was still, she was pregnant with my mom, and it was still a time where they thought you couldn't let pregnant people go see somebody sick in the hospital because it would mark the baby.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, you know, it had been a while that Granny Tori was in the hospital. She was at her mom and dad's place. And she said it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And she just woke up and said Granny Tori was sitting on the bed right beside her, just clear as day. Like, you know, we're looking at each other right now.
Mm-hmm.
And said, Granny Tori said, Judy, I'm going now. Don't let them fight over what little I got left. That very specific line specifically has never changed in all the times that I've told, like she told that story. And she said she'd be singing this song. She had this favorite song that she liked called I'll Be Satisfied, which is actually like it's like a gospel song. She said a little bit later, Pa Harless, her dad, and Ma Venice, her mom, and this woman, Ina Gray, pulled up in the car. And so they were just sitting in the car, and she went out. She walked out to them, and she said, Daddy, I'm sorry, Granny's gone. And she said that they never believed her, that she knew that Granny had passed. So they said, who came and told you? And she said, Granny came and told me. And they never believed her. Maybe like 20 years later, her dad, Pa Harless, was in the Martinsville hospital because he had COPD. You know, he had been bad off for a while. And there was this, she had been in the hospital with him. And there was this one day that he was doing a little bit better. And so she decided to leave the hospital room and go down to the cafe or whatever in the hospital and get something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And all the times I heard this story, it never changed. She said she got tomato soup and grilled cheese. And she started eating a grilled cheese sandwich and started choking. And she said that she knew that Pa Harless had passed. So she ran upstairs, and the doctor said something to her about Pa Harless passing, and she said, I already know. And her mom was there, and she said, well, how do you know? Once again, how do you know? How do you know? You know, and I feel like there's a lot of these stories around my grandma that, like, it's like a communication thing or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she just, like, knows it. And it's funny because after my mom was born, I have twin uncles. And she said that they, from like birth until after they left high school, they were actually involved in a twin study at UVA. And a lot of it focused actually on like shared pain.
Okay.
And she said all the time, like even with them, like when they were little, one would wet their diaper and she knew she would have to get a diaper ready for the other.
Mm-hmm.
One would start crying for a bottle. The other one, she'd have to get a bottle ready. she said they had colic at the same time. Like this is really creepy. And like she said, when they were a little bit older, one of them would come to the door and say, "Our head hurts. Give us an aspirin."
Huh.
And then the other one would come, and they would both have headaches at the same time.
Wow.
And they were both in the Army. And at one point, one was stationed in Korea, and the other one was stationed in Colorado. And it almost became a joke for her that within 15 minutes every day, they would call of each other in the morning.
Huh.
And they would have had like the same breakfast and stuff. But to kind of tie that back to like her and her weird communication thing or whatever, is my one uncle was living in Pennsylvania and got in a really, really, really bad motorcycle accident. And I vaguely remember when this happened, actually, because my cousin was with him. Messed up his foot real bad, like whole 9 yards. And my grandpa was working maybe like 15 minutes away at this place in Meadowsdan. And there wasn't any cell phones then. And my grandma got in the car and drove out and caught him at work and said, "Are you going to Pennsylvania with me?" And he said, "Well, why?" And she said, "'Cause Greg's hurt."
Huh.
She's like, "I don't know how I know, but I know Greg's hurt."
Wow.
And so they came back to the house to pack, because she said, "Well, you can go with me or you can go without me. I'm going."
Mm-hmm.
And when they were at the house and she was packing, his wife called and said he had been in a motorcycle accident.
Wow.
And I remember many times with my grandma, I don't know, I just especially also feel like it's something about her. It sounds crazy. Like, I think a lot of people have weird experiences where you might think of somebody and then something has happened to them. Or I think a lot of people have those kind of experiences.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like my grandma really kind of knows these things. I very specifically remember when I was living with her and my grandpa having experiences like I would be in one end of the house with where the kitchen was at, and she'd be in the other end of the house. And this happened multiple times where I would hear her clear as day say, "Jesse, would you bring me a glass of ice water?" And I would get a glass of ice water and bring it to her, and she'd say, "Well, honey, thank you. I was about to ask you if you could bring me a glass of ice water."
Huh.
And this happened like so many times.
Mm.
And I asked her when I was talking to her recently, I was like, "Do you still have things like this happen?" And she said, "Well, I still know." She said, "Almost every time somebody calls, because she has a landline, she said, almost every time somebody calls, I know who it is calling." And it triggered a memory for me that, like, growing up, I remember her always knowing who it was that was calling. And it was almost like a joke where I would say, "Well, how did you know who it was calling?" And she'd be like, "'Cause I could tell by the ring."
Huh.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like when I lived around her, even I would have experiences where I would randomly think of like a distant relative just out of the blue. And then suddenly we would find out a couple hours later that something had happened to them or one of their loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
But when I moved away from there, I don't know, maybe it's environmental, maybe it's whatever. I don't know what it is. I don't have any kind of experiences like that. For me, it's kind of funny because I was diagnosed like maybe 5 years ago with autism spectrum disorder, which is a communication disability. And so I have a very difficult time communicating, and I find it really funny that it's almost like she has like this extra sensory ability to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
you do wonder if there's some sort of connection there. Yeah.
I think one of the things that bothers me sometimes is I feel like she feels like people have never really believed her.
Mm-hmm.
I think like a continuing theme is that in those stories is that people don't believe her.
Right.
And for me, like having grown up and kind of witnessed some of those things with her, I do believe her.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's especially interesting that, when you're living with her, you're having these very similar kind of things, almost like there's a field around her, where this is happening.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
She does do a little bit of the old ways. Like my grandpa kept bees, and when he died, she still practices some of the old ways. So she went and told the bees that he died.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's very old. That's a very old thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like it might behoove people to take her a little bit more seriously at her word.
Yeah, I would say so.
One story was kind of weird, and one story was just a little weirdness. So.
No, I love them both. I think it's really interesting. I'm glad we got them documented. Did you ever hear anybody just growing up in that area? Did you ever hear anybody talk about like granny magic or anything like that?
Well, so here's the thing about that. So I actually myself practice what could probably be considered Appalachian root work to a certain extent. Well, I'm not going to go off on a huge tangent, but I will say I think that social media and certain people writing books that have maybe weren't from the area or have profited off of it, have exploited it, just like many other parts of Appalachian culture and Appalachian land
same
have
thing
been exploited.
With powwow in Pennsylvania, same thing. Yeah.
One thing I'll say is I've studied a lot of different kind of folk practices, and one thing that I found that was really interesting in studying them is, especially in like southeastern United States, and I'm sure this is I can't qualify for many other areas, but I know at least in southeastern United States, a lot of what could be considered like low country magic, like voodoo, hoodoo, root work, and Appalachian, and maybe even up into central like powwow, there's like two sides to it, where you have like this promulgated, publicized kind of front, but then the real actual practice stuff is called like hidden practice, where it's not really talked about, and it's hidden it's called a folk way for a reason. It's hidden in folk life. And so I know that's like a really drawn out answer. What I'll say is that, like, growing up, what I now know, like, you see kind of like publicized around where people will be like, oh, this thing or that thing, like, oh, the broom falls over, companies come in, this is granny magic kind of thing. Well, growing up, like that's like a really great example. Like, and I still to this day say it, like broomfield companies coming, but it wasn't called magic. It wasn't called
right. Yeah.
Like anything. It was just part of life.
Right. Yeah.
And so we didn't call nothing like granny magic. Now this is older in our area, and I know my grandpa maybe knew somebody, maybe my grandma knew someone. I never met one, but like there were wart witchers and stuff. And I did meet an old man one time that could use, I think it was either dogwood branches to water witch, but it wasn't called magic or something. It was just, if you needed to find like a water line or something, you called out a water witcher. The people that could like wart witch, you had to pass it like from male to female, male to female.
That's interesting. That's usually how powwow went too. A male would teach a female, and female would teach a male, and so on.
Yeah. And it died out. Now, the one thing, Granny Dalton, so my grandpa, Robert Basil, the one that saw that thing in the field, I never knew her to do this. She's the one that played clawhammer.
Okay.
I never saw her to do this, but my grandma said that she saw her do it a lot, is she used to be able to do this thing where if there was somebody pregnant, she could take their wrist and put salt on their wrist, and then she had a necklace and she could, like a pendulum, like put it over their wrist, and she could tell if it was going to be a boy or a girl, and they said she was never wrong.
Wow.
But again, they never called it like
Right. Yeah. No, this is just
magic.
Yeah. It's just part of the culture. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big things. I'm not really on social media, but it does really upset me to see, like, I do Reddit and stuff, and so like I'll see, like, I know there's this like trends and stuff on like TikTok and whatever, all of them, where they're like, all these people, they ain't even from Appalachia, and they're just talking about like skinwalkers and like knotted ears and don't look things don't like go out in the woods after dark. Listen, I'm going to be real plain with you. On one hand, it pisses me off that people once again are trying to just like use Appalachia as like a party favor. But on the other hand, I'm like, if y'all scare everybody to death and don't have them come into the mountains anymore, then that's just fine too. Like,
right.
you know, like
that, yeah.
There's a bunch of them little things. And I think they come from a lot of, you know, like, especially in central Appalachia, you had German people, Polish people, Italian people, not as many Scots-Irish, but you had Scots-Irish people. You had a lot of African-Americans, like free African-American people, and Eastern Band of Cherokee. And it's kind of interesting that you'll see like these weird amalgamations across all of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I know the Long Lost Friend made its way down, man, probably just from German people moving from Pennsylvania down to Appalachia, but I know there are pockets where the Long Lost Friend is used as well there. So it's, I'm sure it's all, you know.
I mean, I'm familiar with it. I have a copy of it back here, actually. So, yeah.
There you go. Jesse, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Thank you. It's good to talk to you again.
Allison, I didn't remind you to bring a curiosity of the week this week.
Yeah, you didn't. So
I didn't. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'll have 7 next week.
We'll be back next week with a new curiosity of the week. I did want to mention Brother Richard has a new book out. It's called Calming the Storms, Meditation as a Path to Inner Peace and Happiness. He would be the guy to write about that for sure. That's published by Hatchet Books from Ireland. I think they're the ones who published his first book as well. Go ahead and check it out. It's called Calming the Storms. Everybody loves Brother Richard. Support him.
Does he have an audiobook? Because I think it'd be...
He did for his last one. I haven't checked for this one yet. He probably does. Yeah.
He reads it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that would be...
Yeah,
I feel like I'm always in favor of physical books over audiobooks, but I do like to read a physical book and then hear the audiobook as well.
Yeah. So Brother Richard sent the book over, along with a nice art print and a very, very nice letter for us as well. So thank you, Brother Richard. No curiosity of the week, but Squatchtober is not yet over. That's true. Got a few more yet.
That means next Thursday will be a Halloween show, right?
Next Thursday's show will be a Halloween show by default.
Will we be on theme, or will it just sort of be accidentally because it's Strange Familiar?
Well, we're supposed to do something with Monster Fuzz, and I'm not sure when that's going to drop. Mm-hmm. But I do have another show that I'd like to put together for Halloween. It's a Bigfoot show recorded in Indiana. So I'll see if I can put that together.
So you're telling me we don't have to dress up and appear on camera in like a Spider-Man outfit like they do?
No, we're not dressing up.
Okay. I mean, they can pull it off, but
yeah,
nobody wants to see us in Spider-Man costumes.
No. Check out our Etsy shop. The shop name is Lost Grave. At our Etsy shop, you can get Strange Familiars t-shirts, including the new blue Eyes of Night print, which is very nice. I really like that one. but quite a few other Strange Familiar shirts there as well, including the classic Awoken Tree logos back in stock, and I think we still have all sizes, small through 3X in that. Copies of my books are there. If you get them from us on Etsy, they come signed. There's also Strange Familiar stickers and mugs, artwork besides the Squatchtober art. You can get originals and prints there. Again, our shop name is Lost Grave. Go ahead and check it out. There's links in the show notes as well to our Etsy shop. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with more Strange Familiars.
Since the dawn of civilization, a man has looked to the skies with the question, are we alone? For centuries, we've tried to explain the unexplainable and justify some of the world's greatest wonders. The Great Pyramids, Stonehenge, the incredible statues of Easter Island, sightings of UFOs all across the globe. And then one day in 1974,
an unidentified flying object that reportedly fell from the sky Saturday night into the silt pond adjoining the Carbondale area high school football field and emitted a bright glow for 9 hours still remains as far as Carbondale police are concerned.
Several explanations were offered to the public, but the mystery grew and became woven into the culture of our great community. Area 51? Overrated. Roswell? Never heard of her. On November 9th, we celebrate the event that put Carbondale on the map. The first annual Carbondalien Festival will take place in downtown Carbondale and celebrate all things supernatural. Come and join us for an epic event unlike any you've ever seen. Awesome vendors, live music, special guests, and interactive activities for the whole family. Don't miss the opportunity to experience what's sure to be the first of many events showcasing our city's rich and colorful history. We'll see you there.
Go to carbondalienfestival.com for more information.
Want to continue spooky season after the 31st? Would you like to dive deeper into the world of the paranormal, the occult, cryptozoology, and other unexplainable topics? Then the Strange Realities Conference is the right one for you. Live and online in Nashville, Tennessee, November 1st and 2nd at SIR Nashville, and November 3rd online only. Strange Realities Conference 2024 will feature presentations by Tim Banal, Nathan Isaac, Kendall Lackey, Brent Rains, Micah Hanks, Ren Collier, Joshua Cutchin, Recluse, Nevaeh Terry, and Steve Berg as your Master of Ceremonies. Online with presentations by Soraya Ascath, Timothy Renner, Katie Andrews, Robert Guffey, Greg Bishop, and Becky Ann Galentine. Tickets are $70 in person the whole weekend or $30 online and are available at strangerealitiesconference.com. Don't miss this amazing opportunity to learn from some of the best spooktacular minds in the field of the paranormal.
Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, you can go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. We're on Instagram at Strange Familiars, one word, no underscore. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Strange Familiars. The Strange Familiars Gathering group is there as well. For Strange Familiars merch, it's strangefamiliars.com/merch. And strangefamiliars.com is where you can find us all the time.
Wandering not lost, we walk through wildflowers, me and my brother, listening for hours to songs of rain showers. the fruit we're seeking. Sangue, sangue, lupi, lupi, sangue.